get into your license plate?
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to call to order the meeting, the Rules, Ordinance, and Franchise Committee, along with the Building Codes and Public Buildings Committee, meeting agenda December 7th, 2020 at, we'll call it 6:30 p.m. It's not the council chambers, however, it's being held here in the gymnasium at City Hall. Let everybody know that normally Councilwoman Monick chairs the Rules, Ordinance, and Franchise Committee, but Council President Bolt had requested that we try to approach this like an ad hoc committee to try to address some of the concerns regarding what are we going to do next after the moratorium runs out regarding the limits that we put on residential development. So with that, we want to pull together some ideas and some mind thought as to what direction you might want to go. We want to listen to the concerns of the residents, and we want to make sure that throughout all of this, we still honor due process, because both sides have stories to tell in regards to what would happen in the future. Keep in mind that property owners, just as each of you have a right to do to a certain extent, to do certain things with your property, other people have that same right. So from a due process standpoint, we want to be fair to all parties, but we also want to at least think about what action would be next in regard to this. So with that, we've created a small agenda that could basically be adapted as we go through here tonight. I know some members of council have some comment. A number of people, including some of those here tonight, have made some recommendations. We did have some emails coming into each of us. I think I forwarded one or more to the clerk. Did you be able to enter those into the record today?
I have printed them all out. If I need to read them into the record, I can.
Okay, and if anybody here had a message that they don't think was, let's just verify it tonight, and or make sure that we have it forwarded to the clerk so that can be added to the public record as well. So, to review the current moratorium that we have on residential.
Mr. Price, before you continue, can I take a roll call?
Yes, thank you, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Ms. Sonic? Here. Mr. Summerson?
Here.
Mr. Holt is not here. Mr. Goodwin?
Here.
Mr. Holt?
Here.
And council recognizes Chief Hyatt and Chief Ray.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is review the current moratorium on residential developments. As those here may be aware, we did put a moratorium on because of the concerns that have been raised recently, and the moratorium has a short lifespan of 6 months, and we want to make sure that you can't just keep renewing a moratorium. All you're doing is opening up the door for more conflict with more parties down the road. So we want to see where we want to go with this and how we would like to move it forward. There are a number of items that we have to follow between codified ordinances, including, and first and foremost, our city charter. And our city charter has certain requirements in it, and one of which, if we are to change any certain standards and or zoning, specifically zoning, it has to go to the vote of the people. So these are concerns that we have to have. Keep in mind that this body of elected officials are all elected by you, but they don't necessarily have the same power that you would have in the form of a vote if these things were put to you through a charter amendment. I also have responded to some of those maybe here tonight. The mayor by charter has a charter commission every 4 years. This would have been the year, but with COVID, it has just simply been impossible to pull together members of the community from every ward that has to be represented and allow at that type of meeting, each one of you, each one a member of council, we come forward with recommendations, many of which, some of the ones that you made here today. So with that, we want everyone to know that that will happen, and how it will happen will all depend on what comes about throughout this country over the next 3 to 6 months in regards to how the pandemic is going to eventually, hopefully, come to an end in regards to the safety and welfare of everyone. So I want to let you know that we're thinking about these things and how we should proceed from here, because again, we want to make sure we So, we've had to, let's go down to, if you don't mind, if there's no objections, is there any other comments that council would like to make? Okay, so we're currently on one in our agenda. You didn't get a copy of the agenda, it's over here on the table. We're going to review the current moratorium on residential developments. And I said it's just a temporary moratorium. So the discussion on limiting the type, we're going to go to part A, discussion on the limiting of the types of residential developments. And if there's no other individual in the council wants to speak up, I'd like to basically give my opinion, and this is strictly as an opinion of one person in this community. I believe, as some have even voiced, even publicly or privately, that a lot of these high-density private drive developments are becoming problematic, especially for the neighbors that are near them. So how do we change that? Do we change? First and foremost, do we change that? Second, how do we change that? And how do we create real change that will be a lasting change? So my only position with that would be through the zoning. The only way I see us doing that is through the zoning change. And the zoning change, I reflect back to the opening comments in regards to putting forward to a vote of people a zoning change that could limit that in the future. And for that to happen, that would have to happen on probably the next ballot. And the clerk would know better than me, but we're running short on time whether we're going to try to get something in the spring on the ballot or not. That could happen within the period of the moratorium. So that was an idea that I had out there, and now open to discussion to my panel members here, if they have any comments on that.
Mr. President, on this private drives, Council President Cole was maybe advocated of changing that as well. But I was looking for some examples of where these private drives are, so I could, visualize where they're at. Can you give me any examples of private drive developments that it's talking about?
Well, you have an answer to that, Mr. Goodman? You want to-
Yeah.
And if any member would like to take their mask off when they're talking, only because I can tell you, Mr. Semlich, I still had trouble hearing exactly what you're saying. So, Mr. Goodman, did you have something you wanted to comment on?
Yeah, we have many private drives in this community. Certainly the ones in McIntosh were initially put in as private drives, only to have the residents then have to afford the, repaving of those when they needed construction. And how did we do that? They weren't built to a standard, and now they have houses that were very close to those roads, and our city standard doesn't allow that. And it doesn't allow, the roads didn't allow for the width that our city standard was. There's many private roads, almost all Fulton Park Road, with the exception of the main road itself. All those other little side streets off of that are private roads. A lot of the condominium developments have private roads, and by allowing that, we set ourselves up for problems in the future.
All right, thank you. That helps me understand a little bit better what Mr. Cole's looking at.
Mr. President, we can get either building, could actually of all of the streets that are currently considered private roads.
Just from my opinion, Mrs. Meyer, there's a lot of ways to approach this. For one thing, we do have board of zoning appeals. So people have an ability to appeal to the board of zoning appeals in regards to certain things like lot sizes. It seems like we're allowing for smaller lots that our zoning doesn't provide for. And suddenly we're getting a rash of people that are wanting to put in these private drive developments under the pretense that the city won't have to maintain these down the road, but we've already seen examples whereby these homeowners associations don't have the funds years later to actually provide the funding needed to continue to maintain the roadways. So we're adding multiple complications by even allowing this type of development. So how do we, from a legislative standpoint, how do we as legislators create relief for this where the taxpayers, all the other people in the community, aren't going to be responsible for that? The answer might be, the question comes up, how do you limit, if not eliminate, the potential for these private drive developments? And so that's the question that I had out there in regards to would it be forbidden regarding zoning throughout the community and could it go to a local community? I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's the position that I kind of think. Because let's face it, we are a community with a charter, which has standing here in the state of Ohio. We have a right to self-rule. And if the voters overwhelmingly, or even just a majority pass some measure that limits future development from a residential standpoint, and or this allows this type of high density development to happen, it's a constitutional change. And why would it not stand up in courts?
Mr. Price, I wasn't asking a question, I'm just saying, like, I'm trying to make a list of things that we might need, because I'm sure this is not the first or the last time we will be, this won't be the last time we will be discussing this, and I think it would be good for everyone, the next time we do meet, to have a map of all the private roads that exist now, so that we can start addressing some of the problems. Because, you know, there might be private roads we don't recall, you know, from our memory, you know, that might, we can say, oh, that's been a problem because of this, or that's been a problem with that. The other thing is, you know, the private roads are managed by the HOA, but when they become public, then it's the city's financial responsibility. And I know in many of the emails that we received, at least one person mentioned that it would be, you know, all these new developments that want to go in, and we know that there's more coming because our community is becoming, you know, a destination for people who want to really live. They're tearing down houses and building, you know, new ones. The other thing I would say, I'm trying to stick to following this in order. When you say in a discussion on limited types of residential responsibilities, are you referring to private versus public streets? Are you referring to like townhomes versus single family versus cluster? So that when I'm talking, I know. And then what I would suggest is what you were referencing, like how do we legislate this? Maybe getting, I know Mrs. Dunlap was excellent at communicating with other communities to try to find out how other communities actually put this in form of legislation. And we can use those as examples as well, or at least a starting point. Because for a long time, it was one street here and there, and now they're all coming very quickly.
Well, the purpose of this committee is to have those discussions that you brought up, and we can keep in mind, we've all heard some of the percentages out there that Broadview Heights is for the most part built out, and now you see a push for developers to try to maximize their number of units, and I guess the question that I keep coming back to for all of us is why is this allowed to be happening? I mean, there are standards that are set up, and again, a board or planning commission was a quasi-judicial board, the same with the BZA, they're giving relief to that, but everyone needs to keep in mind that these are non-elected officials who are members of the residential class here in the community. So, and we can't necessarily, as elected officials, tell them which way to go. And in some cases, we have the ability to make a ruling to agree or disagree. Not in all cases, but in some cases. So, I don't necessarily have an exact answer to you on the density issue. My focus, and I think the conversation that I had with President Wolf, is the conflicts seem to be when we're creating extraordinarily high density private drive developments. And that would be the focus that I have.
Okay, so single family homes.
They can be single single family, or in some cases, we're seeing duplexes, triplexes, even quadplexes.
I'm just, for the agenda, I'm just trying to organize my thoughts and want to know, when you say A, what you're referring to. So you're saying any development,
Yeah, well, under A is a discussion on limiting types of
Types.
residential development, so.
so as in single family versus townhome versus
Sure.
cluster. Okay. What I would also like to see possibly in our next meeting is, and this is for what you just discussed, what land is available in the community that this could potentially have new housing development on. Now, I know that people are buying up interesting, creative lots to be able to propose new development, but I think we should get a handle on what's available out there, so that when we're making these legislative recommendations, that we know what areas of land will affect, because they're not all the same. Every area of town, all four corners are very different, have their uniqueness about them. So, to recap, a map of the private roads that still exist in the community, examples of legislation from other communities and how they limit public-private, and a map of what land is currently available that this would fall under. And then maybe if we have this map of what land is available, we can figure out our percentages of what would be allowed, or what's left over from our master plan. Because just when we think we can't put in another development, they are finding ways to do it.
That's a question. That's a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Because, you talked about seeing how other communities legislate on limiting public and private developments.
Both of public and private, yes.
Okay, so you want limitation, how to limit private development?
Yes.
Private drive development?
Yes, yes, if they have legislation that does that.
Mr. Price?
Yeah, about-
I feel that the majority of us here are not in favor of private drives. Right? It does not benefit the city whatsoever as far as maintaining them, and keeping them up to code. So, do we have to allow private drives? Is that something we're required to allow? The majority of council is not in favor of it.
I think that's what we need to find out legislatively, if we can control that. We're not.
Can I bring something up? We're guessing at some legalities, and we need a special land use attorney to test, we're going to test some of these things. And we should put these questions in a question form to them, rather than guessing and having them challenged potentially, at some point down the line. Variances are, all the rules we put in place can be just thrown out or in a heartbeat by getting a variance. And we need to protect against, something that we intend to do that is later changed by a variance. And I think one of the things that, maybe if we got some examples from the city of Independence in particular, who's had some land use challenges that have been very successful in defending them, that we get some ideas from them of how we can do this in the form of legislation that would be passed by the people, because the vote of the people is one thing that has to stand, sometimes be a challenge in court. And, if we're going to be able to do something, we need to make it bulletproof. So we do need some legal guidance, whether we have someone here available for the meetings, or whether we submit these questions, specifically to a land use attorney. To be able to accomplish something, we definitely need the legal backbone of the profession.
Then go back possibly to Mr. Pellet's question. If I heard it correctly, Mr. Pellet said, do we have to allow private drives? And what you had brought up, Mr. Goodwin, under special land use, and I don't know what specifically you're referring to with Independence is in regards to senior housing. I know they've been able to, it has to go to a vote of the people for that to be allowed. And I know that legislation would fit well mean we couldn't seek out legislation from other communities that might have something that can help us. But I do like what you mentioned here in regards to special land use.
Maybe we could have, legislation in the form of saying that it has to have, one unit per public-private road or driveway, and, you can zone it that way. If it was a zoning issue that was passed by the people, maybe that would solve the community challenge.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wolf.
I realize the scope of the discussion is on private roads, but I would like to add the cost and maintenance of retention basins is also historically been a problem, and it turns into a monetary problem with these HOAs. So, I don't know if we want to extend the scope of this discussion to that as well, or leave that out, but, and also, the formation of HOAs is also historically, as you know, been a problem where they have simply the practice of the HOAs have not been established, and have in fact tried to establish them. And then those funds would be used to, take care of those detention basins, but the HOAs aren't even created, then you have a problem there of ownership on those basins.
And I think we can add to that, Mr. Wolf, not just the roadways, not just the sidewalks, the sanitary sewer connections, the storm connections. I can give an example, I can bring that forward at the next meeting we have, where a private development like that has to take care of all of that. So if you have a manhole that is plugged at on a cul-de-sac in a private drive, it would be their obligation to possibly come forward and have that jetted. It wouldn't necessarily be the responsibility of the city. So there is a way, and I think there's great examples of where that can happen. So, and here's how I think. If we create those added layers, you're going to either have absorbent HOA fees to be able to manage all of that, and have to be enforced. Many of us are as a community, we have to have uncovered balances on hand to be able to handle roots and like that. They would have to have that responsibility as well. So that's a good point.
So when you have a small number of homes, there's a small number of members, and then the price increases per household.
Right.
So if you have 100 houses, it's different than if you have 10.
And I believe the classification of a private driveway is going to be a number of 3 homes or more. If I'm incorrect in that, so let's correct it, feel free to do so.
Mr. Price, if our intention is to not have, let's say, developments that have small numbers of homes, such as, 14 homes, because we've seen these smaller developments that have like that 10-house feel, or that 10-house limit, and then they can't afford to maintain the stormwater. Could we, and I know you don't want to answer, this is just for future getting answers to this question, can we not allow smaller developments because they can't afford the maintenance without any? But you have to obtain more land, and more people have to be factored into your HOA. I know one of the emails that we got in regards to another city issue, people did talk, or one of the suggestions was tying in new developments into existing developments and sharing in costs, or forming a larger HOA than existing development. I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but that was one of the emails that I had gotten from people.
Maybe as part of our planning process or planning commission, maybe they should look at the proposed development. And let's say it has a single retention basin and factor in, to maintain that what the cost would be. And then therefore you have to have at least 25 homes in that development to allow it to proceed. So some type of a procedure that they would go through to calculate if the HOA fees that are reasonably collected could do the maintenance required for the proposed
create standards depending on the number of development. Whether there's 3 homes, whether there's 10 or more, 10 or fewer, whether there's 20 or fewer, 25 or fewer, whatever it is. How do we make a recommendation to the planning commission in regards to the standards of these homes?
Or if we had a formula to determine the cost per home on an annual basis by the size of the development and requirements of the development. Maybe complicated, but that would give you a good reading of what the expected cost would be.
The greatest level of complication for those who are in this tonight is we have HOAs throughout this community, and yet every one of us at every development here, eventually from a property owner who purchased a house, not knowing they have an HOA, not knowing they have obligations that have to be maintained and kept, and or annual dues that have to be paid. And so, how do we require that as a disclosure when a home is being sold? We've had complications in the past from a legal standpoint because we're not real estate agents and brokers, and it's not necessarily the city's responsibility to create those disclosures. So these are the complexities that we have to deal with.
Mr. Price, another question I had, in the emails we received is, if there are private streets and the HOAs are not financially maintaining, whether it's sanitary streets or stormwater, what is the city's response? Is the city stepping in and paying for them? So we might need to have rules and regulations on how we're going to maintain that, because what we're finding is things that happened 25, 30 years ago, it's all in us right now. And we need to find solutions to these dilemmas, because they're affecting people who live in our environment, that aren't part of those developments.
If we're on the mandated stormwater controls, I have 2 very important wishes that I'd like to see the city move forward with. One of those is reinstate a riparian way setback ordinance. At one time, I know during my lifetime, we had a riparian way setback ordinance, the minimum distance from any sort of water course, wetlands area, anything that had to do with water. And it was in place for building new developments. And then just recently, I inquired with the city engineer, and that ordinance does not exist anymore. And it got changed at some point, whether it got changed by, legislation got readjusted. But I think we really need to look at that, because that is one of our biggest problems, is water affecting people's houses. And we need to. The way it was done at the time, and I don't remember if it was done prior to everybody else being elected here, but it was done with consultation from Cuyahoga County Soil and Water District, and they provided the legislation and the ideas that put together, that piece of legislation. And it was a very good ordinance at the time, and somehow that has disappeared, and I'd like to see that come back. The other idea that, other thing I'd like to see this committee resolve is designing a better standard for construction materials in the culverts.
Mr. Goodman, before we jump, because we're kind of talking there, I wanted to go to under number 1 and B, is if there are any other comments on the review of the future of high-density residential developments. My only recommendation in that regard was limiting the number of units based on an acreage consideration. So, each very good thoughts about stormwater there, we'll come back to that next. But if we have anybody else that would like to make some comments on that?
I'd like to also make a comment regarding the setback of the buffer. 25-foot buffer between new developments and existing residential homes. If we could discuss, possibly, the legislation that regarding it.
driveways. And I'd like to eventually, before we wrap this up, open the floor to the residents that would want to make comments as well.
I have one comment that if we're gonna have this type of meeting where there's a lot of legal questions, we should have our law department, in attendance. And if they can't answer the question, then they should write the question down and see, the answer from somebody that knows the answer, because I think if we don't do it that way, we're gonna be wasting a lot of time.
So that all my colleagues know, making notes together, the highlights of these comments so that we can let everybody review them and then make any additional comments regarding what's been said. Mr. Bolt?
Just one comment on the other one, because I'm gonna stand back. When everybody comes with their ideas, but remember, this legislation, this is stuff that we're gonna put on the books, that has to be, a self-supporting system, and it's gotta be able to be, people own land out there, they have a right to do what they want with their land. So we have to watch that we don't put too many parameters on, because all you're asking for is lawsuits. What we need to do with this legislation is take the current legislation we have, take a step forward, protect our residents, to the fact that we don't get into a lawsuit. Once you get in a lawsuit, it's all or nothing. We can lose that and more. So the thought process, I understand we want bumpers, McIntosh at 25 feet, all our legislation does what we don't want to call it. So if an outside firm, we don't need to do that. This room was more than capable, lend a lot of money. So he's more than capable of looking at this legislation to keep the costs down. But it just, we all have our ideas about this legislation, where we want to go with it. We just have to be aware, don't make it too big. You make it too big, that's where you get into trouble. You need to take one giant step forward, protect the residents from the, non-standard streets. I think that's one of the key things, because you guys mentioned the HOA, maybe we should have 20, maybe we should have 30, maybe we should have 40. None of them are gonna survive, because of the underlying costs with them. McIntosh has 1,000 homes per se over there, so they need to be self-sufficient. The legislation should push where the HOAs become self-sufficient. If they're self-sufficient, it works. And the private driveways won't work. The costs are going to be too high in the future. The rest of the taxpayers are going to have to pay. The only other way you're going to be able to do it is when somebody buys a private drive, and there's 20 of them. That's $1 million price tag on the road. 500,000, whatever. You start doing the math on 20 people paying, what, $300 a year? How many years is it going to take to pay off that road on that tag? So, like that we're talking about, like that we're having a lot of ideas on, it's, the residents rely on us to protect them. So we need to make sure that we put legislation, suitable legislation in to help protect the people and not get us in trouble. So that's my biggest thing. And as far as the return and setback, it's still close. It's 75 feet. Still close. But we haven't changed.
In the opening comments, we had discussed about due process. Our codified ordinance, our charter, as well as the property owners. So we want to make sure that anything we bring forward is cognitive of all those variables that we have to work with. I can give an example. A community, Carlisle Township, could not afford to replace the private drive, and the homeowners in that development each were assessed $33,000 to replace the road rates. And that's what could be, unfortunately, that's what could happen to these future high-density private drive property owners. And they always look for relief from the local community that may not be able to provide that relief. Not just because of the finances of it, because regarding our review of the future high-density residential development. We want to, my comments I wanted to make regarding stormwater. The only real reason I brought forward stormwater wasn't to talk about specific stormwater system, not to talk about a specific design. It was about a conversation I had with the engineer. We have things built to a certain storm standard. One of the comments that was made at an earlier meeting was that, this community has seen in the last 12 years, 7 100-year storms. So how do we react to that? And one of the references in regards to Mr. Yelenowski is we take the standards of a 100-year storm and we make the requirements equal to a 100-year storm plus 20% or 25% when it comes to the specifications required from an engineering standpoint. So the question before council is how do we do that? Can we do that? And why would we want to do that?
Can I make a suggestion that when we discuss stormwater controls that we have, our city engineer here, we break that down at different times or so that I have a different answer for the riparian setback than you do, and I want to make sure it's crystal clear that difference. Why is that different? The answer that I got, that you got, and I'm sure it's in communication or something. But if we have our engineer, when we just discuss those engineering standards, I think that would be important, for that part. He doesn't need to sit in and waste his time obviously sit on the desk.
Mr. Goodwin, those that need to be addressed in our safety services meeting.
Any other comments?
Mr. Wolf, are you referring to, the calculations to raise the standards to 100 years plus 20%?
Correct.
Okay. I think, for organization purposes, because we just did one, and there were so many things, were brought up in just item number one, that if we categorize these into 3 different zones, one is the first, which has to do with natural housing, HOA setbacks, second with stormwater, and the third one feels like more like, communication, whether it's meeting agendas or information. And then if you have the legislation ready prior to that meeting and focus on that, because if you try to focus, in my opinion, I'm sorry, I disagree, all three at one time, we're all over the place. We even designed agenda item number one before we're going to stormwater. This is not organize ourselves and then try to attack each one of our current legislation and then see how we can make improvements. And I agree with what Mr. Wolf said, while we're doing this, we also have to recognize that the landowners have rights too, and they have a right to develop their land. And I have a development going on right behind my house, so I'm living through this discussion, right now. I was fortunate enough to have councilman, Mr. Wolf, our neighbors above her. So I'm living through those experiences right now, but I definitely think we need to organize this because there's so much information.
To your point, I did talk to Mr. Price. We talked about 3 things we wanted to talk about. First was notifications, the second was the moratorium. I asked Mr. Price to take those on in this committee.
Yes.
Mr. Wolf will take on the stormwater issues.
Insert.
When Mr. Wolf is done, and his committee votes on it, it comes to the resolution, then it'll come back to this committee for legislation purposes only. These are absolutely right. It's too big for one committee.
Yeah.
Any other comments? If we go on to number 3, the city process of development, lot splits, consolidations, etc. for BZA and the planning commission. And main, topic under this is notification, residential notifications. What we have seen, our charter and or ordinances support basically Ohio Revised Code, which is everyone within 500 feet must be notified of variances under consideration. So as we are a charter committee and under some rule, one of the questions that have been asked is should we consider expanding that to greater than 500 feet and taking it to 1,000 feet?
Yes, I've heard that from several residents, and they, even suggested having the developer or whoever's coming with the plans, the city pay for those costs. The suggested size of receiving residents is 1,000 feet, and that's not just residential development, that's also, economic business development as well.
Right now, it is paid for by the developer. They pay a stipend to do it.
I don't think all residents know that.
I think we should do some research with the post office to see if they offer a service, where if we give them a parcel of land, if they can generate the people within the 500, 750, 1,000, whatever we come up with, to get that off the administration. I've heard too many times where somebody said they weren't notified, and I'm not picking sides on this to say they weren't or they were, you know, everybody gets mail all the time. And believe me, we only read 5% of it, and the rest of us goes. So, it's not my argument. My argument is this: post office is extremely good at what we do. So, if there is a way that we can ask them that if something happens on a parcel of land, they can come back and say, hey, you know, it's gonna cost you $300 to make sure everybody gets notified. And we'll just hand that bill to the developer. That way the city's not involved in this whatsoever, but then make sure it's executed.
That's a great suggestion. I mean, there might be additional resources we can use for the U.S. Postal Service that we haven't even thought about it. I think that's a great idea.
And the other reason I thought that we should entertain that is we don't want to cost. I'm sure some of them, you know, it could be $100, $200, others just, I think we could set it at $250, but if it costs more than that, it's easy. So, as far as expanding from 500, one thing we have to realize too is I don't have a problem expanding anything going to the planning commission and the developments and the businesses. 1,000 may be appropriate. I think we have to watch though on the BCA side of it. Because the BCA side of it is, I want to put up a 7-foot fence. Is it gonna cost him $400 to make sure they're within 500 feet because he's a violation of 1 foot? I mean, you got to be, think about that.
You might need to have categories. Yeah. Someone sits out to live in like a backyard fence and no actually see.
One concern that has come up, I know Council President Bull chairs our committee for the Planning Commission. Councilman Pavlik is almost there at every meeting, and I attend most of them. At the BCA, Councilman Pavlik is there, of course I represent council. But when they get down to just 3 members on the BCA or the Planning Commission, they often offer to the presenter the opportunity to table an issue concerned with the fact that they need all 3 members to vote affirmative. And by doing that, they reschedule another date, and then the original people that are notified are not re-notified. So the question I have is, can we then, if someone, and they have to ask for the commission can't tell them to do it, the BCA can't tell them to do it, but if they agree to allow, or if they agree and they ask to have this item tabled, so they can have a full board of maybe 5 members, with the hopes of having a favorable vote, why can we not then provide a re-notification as to the new meeting date and make the petitioner pay for that?
But the BZA, sorry, if the ECA isn't showing up, that's not the applicant's fault. They shouldn't be punished.
It's not, but if there are 3 members there, they're qualified to make a vote. And often, this is fine, the BZA will remind them, you need 3 affirmative votes, and if you have any concern that you may not get 3 affirmative votes, and this usually comes after questions and answers, they say you could be allowed to table this item, and when they do that at the BZA, and it happens quite often at the planning commission, what are we doing to re-notify these residents? And that's always been a difficult question to answer.
Is there a reason why there are only 4 members attending the meeting, or is this common, or is this not common? How do you clear it there?
Maybe we would need to review the quorum requirements for that committee.
What's that, Mr. Wolf?
Maybe we need to review the quorum requirements for that committee. If they have 3, then it may not be a quorum. Then everything gets
Are
rescheduled.
you suggesting that the board would then be 2 out of 3?
No, and they
If
didn't
you had
have a
that quorum
quorum.
for 3,
They didn't have a quorum for the whole committee, then in a smaller subset, larger than 3, maybe required.
so you have a higher quorum of 4, and only 3 show up, and will the city pay for the re-notification of all those residents? I mean, these are all valid questions that we need to consider. If this is what's happening over and over again, and we have residents show up and say, well, they rescheduled it, but I wasn't able to see it on the city website, I didn't know this meeting was gonna be held, why didn't somebody notify me again?
The applicants have right to have full meetings, just like when people come to see us, they expect they'll send it to us. Maybe occasionally one of us is not here, but the expectation is that we're all here, even though it improves business less.
Also, we had applicants not show up, but have to be rescheduled as well, so that is not from the board's fault, that's on the applicant.
So maybe there needs to be a penalty in that case too. Because that's people's time.
So if the applicant doesn't show up, Mr. Wolf, why would we not then hold off and reschedule the next following day to let the applicant pay to have people re-notified?
Well, and like I said, we're talking BCA, I'm thinking, yes, there's developments that go in, I completely agree they should. But I'm talking about Joe Smith on the street, house, Bill Thompson. Let's put it a foot higher. That's an incredible cost giving to the residents. So let's look at the root of the problem, let's separate this first. Let's not talk about how many people are there. Let's just talk about the table. As you guys know, I never have allowed a third review table at council. It's not transparent, it's not fair. People come to see the vote, they want to be able to look at us when we're voting, and for us to pass legislation in the middle of it and nobody's around, it's just bad. So that's why always on the second, I tell everybody when we're gonna vote on it, that way the public knows. So I agree with you, on the tabling situation, we want to protect the residents, they have a right to be there when the vote happens. So there's a few ways we can split this, yes, we can turn around and make sure they go through the process again, go through the post office, make them pay a postage, tell them what date's gonna happen, and then show up. Or we can tell the engineering department that they're required to send an email to all the residents that's on the outside line.
I would also add the reverse 911 system possibly.
Absolutely. We can ask the mayor also to put it on all the planning commission or the BZA, everything on that night. Most people, you get an email from the mayor on Fridays,
there are any other comments from members of the council, I would like to open this up to the floor for residents to speak. I would ask you to limit your comments, because others may want to speak, but we are running long on time. So first, I'd like to ask my colleagues for the final go around if they have any other comments before we do that.
I was just gonna say, Mr. Price, there were two other things that were sent to me in regards to notifications, well, a couple. And this might not necessarily tie into legislative process we're having right now. People did mention via email about postponing certain kinds of meetings. And so the COVID issue is the stay-at-home orders have been lifted, because some people feel like they can't come for ask questions or follow-up questions because they have to wait for minutes to come. So I want to say that. I also heard from developers to make sure that when we're having meetings, or to ask that when we're having meetings in regards to their development or proposals, that it sticks to whatever sheet that they receive with all their meetings. Maybe that they felt like a meeting was taking place that they should be there at, and they were notified to be there. The applicant. And then there were just some comments about making sure that the city calendar is updated regularly, for these types of meetings, so people who might not have email also access it on them, and there may or may not have been problems with that. Those are all the comments I received from residents recently in regards to notifications.
Any other comments?
Mr. Price, this is, as we all know, it's going to be a huge undertaking. But I foresee that we can make some great strides in the positive by going through this process. And it's going to take a long time. It's going to take us many meetings. It's going to be quite the process. Can't wait to see how it ends.
You know, I haven't checked the schedule yet with the clerk, but January 4th is open day. We have to follow up to this, to look at the recap, and you can also ask if there's no objection, if there's some valid points about having the engineer there and having the water there.
I'll ask them both to be at the meeting. Now, the engineer will be at the service. This is getting moved from your agenda at this time. The law director, I'll ask him about the moratorium and the notification of those topics.
Well, that's a good representative for building too.
I don't think there'll be any objections to starting our meeting late if necessary, but if there's no other comments, I'd like to open it up to any resident comments. Again, I ask you to limit to no more than 3 minutes, just to try to give everyone a fair chance to say something if you have something else you'd like to add. Please state your name and address for the record.
Carolyn Bodak, 1880 West Broadview. I just have something brief. I just want to really thank you for putting so much effort into this, and I apologize for getting inundated with all these emails last minute. We just saw on Friday that these two meetings were put on the schedule. So kind of we had a running list of things going, and I think we just got bombarded with it. And I hope this
Could you get close to the microphone, and if you need to bend it down to you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm from at the top center, Broadview, Broadview. Or I like associations and stormwater management. So I just want to mention that we don't, so our homeowners association is solely for the management of the stormwater drainage basin, which is my basement. And one of the searching through the internet, is wanted to dissolve our homeowners association. Basically, what was the process because of the then so I was wondering if the legal process it will file in our state for corporation instead of home association the which is guaranteed and a lot of post office competition user fees sewer fees the drainage fees
Did you understand what you were trying to say?
Mr. Bowman, can I ask you to answer the
Instead of the homeowners having these three in the neighborhood, is you branch this out where the city would have a homeowners association for all the parcels or neighborhoods, and they would control, make sure all the stormwater studies get done, make sure that any improvements that need to be done. That way, the smaller neighborhoods don't get inundated, where the larger neighborhoods have a little more funding to be able to complete the higher ticket items.
Yeah, so are we referencing, like, for instance, neighborhoods that don't have HOAs?
I think she's saying anybody that does, make them all under one. Because I don't think if they don't have an HOA, we can make them. Or
With that,
there will be a discussion, council wants to put a flat tax on the city. I don't know how it would be. I don't know how it would be.
well, that would be a question for water, but you live on Rocky Court, so you do have an HOA there, right? So the part of the problem, and I'm not an attorney, but constitutionally, how do you force these other HOAs to abide by a master plan for HOAs when you haven't done that before? Then you're forcing them into an association that they may have never agreed to go into. So therefore, it could be that's one of the opinions we've had in the past. There are some older developments that don't have HOAs. You can't force them into an association. Only to the time the ordinances were created, which was like in 1991.
She's new to the city because she's out of Rocky's Court. I think she's thinking about, we had that 4-hour stormwater that we charged all the residents and had a few issues. So I think she's looking at it from that aspect.
I'd be curious, Mr. Bolton, that exists anywhere else. There may be something we could look into or pilot some of these shorter streets homes, but rather than be a great idea.
That could be a consideration just from the history before Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District took it over, and we had a utility. Many here had promised that if the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, as it was being litigated, if we were forced to bring them into the city under the stormwater management plan, we would stop that utility at that time. It doesn't mean we couldn't reconsider it again. So that's a good question.
I don't know if everybody knows, but at one point, we had a utility in Broadview Heights where the stormwater. And Northeast Ohio Sewer District came in, and we thought it was too close to double taxation. So that
to be crystal clear, what we're discussing this evening is new subdivision. It is something that we do need to tackle for years and other ones in the separate issue there. You know, wouldn't want that to hold back anything that we would do on the new subdivisions.
What are your subdivision issues?
Thank you for sharing that idea.
Anyone else wishing to speak tonight? Seeing none, any final comments from council? Is everyone available, council clerk, are we having a meeting on January the 4th? Will everybody feel comfortable enough for now to talk to a follow-up meeting in regards to this?